So I'm logged into a small, actually, you can see that right there. So this is a small fabric we have built here, basically, just for some stuff that's going on, and I'm logged into that. What this fabric is of two switches. One is obviously NetWiser running on a white box, basically, or equivalent of a canonical white box. The other is a mid-size appliance, and then the third is one of our heavier appliances, basically, right? So one of the things that we wanted to show was that, look, you can fabric anything with anything. You can actually run something as simple as a port show, basically, right? And you can see the ports and the VM on the port and so on and so forth, right? You can see what is connected. And typically what you're seeing, the IP and MAC here, is really the vPort information, basically, right? And we'll go into those details later, basically. But the whole idea is that from one CLI, you're seeing all switches. You can manage individual switches. You can manage individual ports and whatever you want, basically, right? Interesting enough, this is the same topology, and I should have brought the topology picture up, but it is same topology that I was showing you before. Two switches are in L2 fabric, going via tunnel over L3, and you can see the tunnel basically between the two switches, right? We obviously, our analytics work at the level of individual connections, so you can actually go and look at individual connections, and you can see and we just ran some workload here, you can see which client, which server talking to which service, and so on and so forth, basically, right? The more interesting part is if you look at the port show info again, there are a bunch of VMs here, right, that are connected, and a bunch of servers there, and there are a bunch of them here talking over L3 tunnel, basically, right? So one thing that our analytics does is, tunnel or non-tunnel, it actually looks inside, right? So all the connections inside the tunnel are also visible. One of the key demands from our customer is that, how do I debug things inside tunnel, right? So when you run tunnel from switch to switch, basically, our analytics are showing you everything inside the tunnel and outside the tunnel, and everything becomes visible to you, basically, right?
Could you make the font bigger, please?
Sure. It's good enough. You guys can see it?
Better.
We do have beer in the fridge. I tell you, right? After beer, it will actually be razor sharp.
Well, there was a Twitter comment that it might not show up too well in the video.
Okay. So there is, I have a guest here, and what we are going to do is split up some of this. And then I wanted to show a couple of things before we go into more demo. We wanted to talk about services, basically, right? So one of the things that I wanted to also show is that, these boxes are also a distributed service architecture, right? So one of the idea is that, as VMs migrate, they need their services as well, right? So the whole goal here is that, we run, and there are three major services that we initially care about that needs to be distributed. One is firewalling, second is routing, and then the third is load balancing, right? So typically what ends up happening is that, you keep spinning these distributed services, basically, based on, if there is a service, a virtual network here, which has VMs here as well, then spin another one in here as well, basically, and you can actually see some of these things. So the idea is, and as this came up in one of the NFDs, that, yeah, I get the fabrics and all the things you're building up. What about the services, right? The services need to be distributed as well. And we've been working on that anyway, and we got a lot of customer demand as well to say, we need this. So ended up actually using partners and creating, some of the new startups which are in this space to help build the services, right?
Question about that, because I've been working with that model, and it seems to be evolving fast,
right,
in terms of clustered firewalls and other things. But generally, you want to keep traffic within one of the locations, or pods or layer 3 units.
So you are 100% correct, right? Your orchestration software, which is deploying the VMs, be it vSphere or whatever, needs to be smart enough and try to place the VM closer to each other. But for various reasons, you have to go across pod boundary, right? It might be a HA reason. It might be, I got a split data center. I got one campus here. I got one campus there. Pod is not big enough because I'm Netflix, so I'm going to go and expand and so on and so forth, right? So when the VMs go across pods boundaries, basically, right, where do the service go? Simple services, which is, again, firewalling, routing, and these virtualized services, you want to, the VM is here. You don't want it to pin on going to the old side to get routed, basically, right?
How many instances of the distributed state are you going to have to make
so
that work
depending on, it's again a very good question. Routing we can deal with a lot more because we offload the routing to the hardware, right? A lot of the simpler services, firewalling, a lot of the firewall state is offloaded to the switch hardware underneath on the TCAM, so you can have bigger instances, right? And it depends on, again, like I said, no magic there. At the end of the day, it's a server OS with, dual socket Intel CPUs and hypervisor. So depending on the server load and what load the VM is causing, you'll have the same thing. Typically, you can have anywhere between 20 to 100 if necessary, depending on what they're doing. The only advantage you have is you have a TCAM underneath you, right? And multiple tables underneath you. And the Flow API NetWiser provides allows you to offload a lot of that to the hardware, right? So routing, for instance, doesn't make sense to run on servers anymore because these guys are all capable of doing routing in the hardware, basically, virtualized as well. So you want to move that into here. A lot of the TCP splicing, and we are building Flow APIs, expanding the Flow API to even offload L7 functionality into the hardware where possible. So TCP splice actually can happen in hardware. So you can actually set up the flow in software and actually offload it to the hardware underneath and so on, right? So that's the kind of things we are trying to leverage the hardware for.
I'm thinking that may not be something that the existing vendors of such products can deliver. Different paradigm. So you're rolling your own?
So we are, actually, this is why I have Shiva here. They are developing service which actually takes advantage of this. VeloCloud is developing services that take advantage of it, right? We have, where did it go? Here, like, sorry, I should have mirrored the screen. We have a whole bunch of services running on there. There is a Fortinet instance running in there. There is a CentOS instance running in there. And it's fairly simple, right? So, and maybe I have a browser open somewhere which can connect to that Fortinet instance, and you'll see that.
And that Fortinet instance is running on the server switch?
On the server switch itself, right? So, the reason I'm going through this is Fortinet has a mechanism to, and it says, because they're a partner, we should get some free licenses here. But you can actually see and run the Fortinet VM, and you'll have to use their architecture to deploy these VMs across the pod, and they're doing the integration to understand the fabric and virtualization capability to do that, basically. But the guys who have done a very good job of this is our friends here, which I'm going to introduce, Appcito. This is a startup that is actually running L7, distributed L7 load balancers, basically, right? And they have gone and done a full integration of, instead of where you have a lot of hairpinning, the load balancing services goes across the switches, and based on virtual networks and so on and so forth, they can actually go and run this, right? So Shiva, do you want to, guys, this is a small demo, but I'm going to come back and do a lot more analytics demo and vFlow demos that you guys are looking for. But let's talk to Shiva first.